Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. This week, I'm back with another Q&A session. I asked you guys what questions you wanted answered, and you came prepared with some really great questions. So I'm excited to jump in and give you guys some of my thoughts. If you're new here, my name is Julia, and I am a wedding planner. Every week, I give you guys video content to help you plan your weddings. So yeah, let's jump in. So the first question comes from Megan. She says, my fiance and I want to do a grand exit with sparklers and have great pictures of it, but our photographer is only with us from noon to 8 p.m. and I assume we will be dancing and such for much longer than after 8. Our photographer mentioned possibly going out to get sunset pictures by this beautiful lake and then doing those pictures as we come back in to the reception hall from the lake. Do you have any suggestions on how we can incorporate this? So yes, I definitely have lots of thoughts and ways that you can accomplish this. So while you can certainly stage this, a lot of guests will take this as a cue that it's time to wrap up for the night. So rather than trying to avoid that, I say take advantage of that. In other words, build that into your timeline. So for example, make sure before you go out to take sunset pictures around 8 o'clock that you've completed all of the other wedding festivities that were planned for that evening. So make sure all of your speeches are done, cake cutting, the dances, anything that was planned, make sure that that wraps up right before you go out and do sunset photos. A lot of people will take, the cake cutting or your thank you speech or something like that that's planned in the night as the cue that the night is wrapping up. So if you time it where in that thank you speech, you give them an idea of what's going to happen for the rest of the night, you can say in that speech, now we're going to be taking some sunset photos in about 10-15 minutes or however long. Please join us outside for a grand exit. We are going to be coming back in and continuing the night. So for those that wish to party all night long with us, please come back and join us for the rest of the reception and just have that as part of your thank you speech. So if they do take that as a cue to wrap up, they haven't missed anything and they get to be involved in your grand exit. So you'll find that it ends up being a really nice transition between those that want to leave earlier, either, the elderly or those that have kids, and they'll leave during that transition phase. And then the people that come back to the reception with you are ready to party all night long, and it'll be a really great, exciting vibe coming back into the reception. So I hope that helps, Megan. Definitely do the grand exit, get those photos, take advantage of that time with your photographer, but schedule it into your night and think about how it's going to impact the flow of your event. Okay, so this next question comes from Caitlin. Caitlin wants to know, is it worth the cost, an extra $2,000 to have the venue for the entire day before the event? I had a follow-up question. I asked, who's doing the setup and what time the wedding is. And Caitlin said that her family would be helping to set up with some help from the venue and that she doesn't have a scheduled ceremony time yet, but she'll be at the venue at 11 a.m. the day of the ceremony. Yeah, definitely can help with this, Caitlin. It really does depend on the setup and how you want to accomplish the setup. So for example, if you decided that you wanted a noon wedding and you only got to the venue at 11 a.m., then you only have an hour to set up the wedding, and that probably won't be feasible even if you have all of your friends and family help you. It's probably going to be very difficult to do that. So that might be a good reason to pay the $2,000 to have the day before to set up so that nothing goes wrong on the day of your wedding. But because you don't have your ceremony time picked yet, you can plan around that and you can say, okay, well, maybe we'll have a 3 o'clock ceremony or a 4 o'clock ceremony, and then that will still give you several hours the day of the wedding to set up. The caveat though is, do you really want your friends and family to be setting up your wedding on the day of the wedding? You also need to factor in time for them to be able to get ready, because I can say from experience, setting up a ceremony, you're running around a lot. It's not cute. You're not going to be, you don't want to be doing that in your heels, My personal opinion would be to not have the $2,000 to set up the day before, but to use some money to pay for a setup crew to come. You can pay for, 4 to 5 hours of a setup crew to come and take care of the setup, and then schedule your ceremony time around that. And then that way you're probably still saving money, because you can probably do that for less than $2,000, but then you don't have to worry about you having the stress of setting up or your family having the stress of setting up, and then you can leave it in the hands of a professional who will make sure that that goes smooth. Ideally, get yourself a day of coordinator as well. I think that would be a much better use of that limited budget. So I hope that helps, Caitlin. Okay, so this next question is 2 parts. So this question comes from Taylor. She asked, my biggest question would be how to figure out the best timeline for my wedding. Our reception and ceremony are at the same place, and we're planning a 2:30 ceremony and a reception that goes until 9:30. And she said that she's doing a 3 to 4 cocktail hour. So Taylor, I think you've got everything covered. I mean, this timeline looks good to me. 30 minutes for your ceremony, then you have an hour for cocktail hour, and then you have a reception from 4 to 9:30. I mean, I think that's a great amount of time. Obviously, there are other things to take into account. So for example, I would definitely take into account setup time, breakdown time, making sure that that 9:30 isn't when you need to be out of there, and not including breakdown, because breakdown takes time too. So just make sure that that's taken into account in your timeline. But the next step is really just breaking down that timeline to the very specific activities that you want planned throughout your wedding day, which is kind of what you talk about in your second question. So let's jump to the second part of your question now. And then Taylor said, we're looking for fun activities to do and keep the guests entertained. We want to do the first dance, father-daughter, mother-son dance, bouquet toss, garter toss, but we're not sure what other fun games or things we can do with our guests, and we really want to keep them entertained because it's such a long event. Okay. Great question. First of all, I think it's so smart that you are thinking about keeping your guests entertained and thinking about the flow of your event. That is so smart, and it's going to make for a better wedding reception in the long run. And while yes, it is a long event, there are a few key things to take into account that should be incorporated in your timeline that will take a big chunk of that timeline. So for example, dinner. Say you get back at 4 o'clock after cocktail hour. Are you jumping right into dinner? Or are you going to do some speeches first? Are you going to do some activities first and then do dinner later? Either way, no matter what you choose, dinner and speeches, stuff like that, usually takes about an hour, maybe a little bit longer, depending on what you're doing for dinner. So make sure that you include that in your timeline, because once you include dinner, speeches, all those activities, you're gonna see that there's a lot less downtime than you might have originally thought. And don't forget that a good part of a wedding reception is dancing, is people on the dance floor. So even if you do have some downtime where people don't have anything formal happening, that is the time that your DJ should be really pumping up the crowd and getting the party going on the dance floor. Also include that in your timeline. You want to encourage people to dance and have a good time on the dance floor. And then a bar, let's face it, if you're having an open bar, it's definitely a good insurance policy to make sure that your guests have a good time. And if you're not, there are still other ways that you can encourage your guests to have a good time, but an open bar does help. Another great thing that you can do is a photo booth. It can be a DIY photo booth with a backdrop. It could be one of the photo booths that you rent from a company like your DJ, or you can even just provide disposable cameras or Polaroid cameras so that guests can take photos at their own will. Just bear in mind that if you do that way, you're probably not getting high quality photos from it, but it is something that guests will have a pretty good time with. And then think about the other activities too. There's the cake cutting. Are you doing a thank you speech? Are you doing a grand exit? Those are all things you can consider to incorporate in your wedding timeline that will definitely take up those 5 hours. And then definitely reach out to your photographer and DJ too, because ultimately they're the ones that you've hired to either capture the evening or keep the evening going. So especially your DJ, when thinking about keeping guests entertained, your DJ will be your partner for that. So definitely reach out to them specifically, because they'll have a lot of ideas on how to keep your guests entertained, and they are ultimately the ones responsible for keeping everyone excited throughout the night. So lean on them. But I do want to leave us with like one last tidbit of advice pertaining to keeping guests excited. If I'm being honest, you can do as much planning as possible and they still might not have a good time. To me, the best way that you can encourage your guests to enjoy themselves is if you enjoy yourself. I know it kind of seems corny or whatever, but it's true. I mean, think about it. The vibe of a room is contagious. If the bride and groom are not having a good time, guests usually pick up on it. But if you're on the dance floor, if you're like putting it all out there and you're laughing and having a grand old time and not having a care in the world, your guests are going to love that. And they're going to want to be right on the dance floor alongside of you, and they're going to want to be partying and celebrating right alongside you. If there's anything that you can do to ensure that your guests have a good time, it's that you have a good time. I hope that helps. Taylor, it's definitely an exciting time, and a wedding reception should be the time of your life. So enjoy it. All right, and our last question from the day comes from Cynthia. Cynthia wants to know, how do you go about finding a good wedding coordinator? I'm thinking about hiring one, but I don't know where to start. Well, I might be a little biased, but I love this question. I talk a little bit about this in the video I made called What is a Wedding Planner? I'll link it up above if you guys want to check that out. But the first step is really identifying what your needs are. You'll really want to identify what type of services do you really want your wedding coordinator to provide to you. Also, a good wedding planner can help you identify those needs. So if you're really stuck, you can reach out to wedding planners in your local area, let them know that you're looking for a wedding coordinator, but you don't know where to start. From there, you'll be able to get a good idea on whether or not you click with that person or whether that person can really help you navigate the unknowns that you might have. Which brings me to my next point. So your wedding coordinator is really your partner in your wedding planning process. It's your sidekick on the day of. They're the person responsible for making sure that the day goes smooth. So it's really important that you click and vibe really well with your wedding coordinator. You definitely want to make sure that you meet them either on video or in person so that you can really get a feel for whether or not you click. They need to be able to know you as a person, be able to understand your wedding vision, and you really won't know how well they're able to grasp you and your wedding vision without having conversations with them. So when you vet your wedding coordinator, have a few conversations with different coordinators and really get a feel for what you like and what you don't like in those conversations. You know, like as a wedding planner, I get that I'm not always going to be the best fit for everybody. There might be another wedding coordinator that they click more with, and that is perfectly fine. I would so much rather a bride let me know that they found someone that they vibe with better, and that's a great reason to not hire me. And I respect that and I value that. Just like I think vice versa, you know, if someone clicks with me really well, it might be a reason why they hire me over someone else. So I hope that was helpful, Cynthia. I know it's not a lot on this topic. I'm going to be sharing a lot more content on this topic as a whole in general, but at the end of the day, definitely reach out to wedding coordinators in your local area. Let them know that you're not really sure what your needs are, see what they say, and then ultimately make sure that you're a good fit with them and that they get the vibe for your wedding, because that's important. All right, so that is all for today. I hope you guys enjoyed those questions, that you found some of them or all of them helpful to you in your wedding planning. If you guys have any questions for me that didn't get addressed here, please put them down in the comments below. I will definitely answer them personally. And if you want to stay in touch with all things weddings, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. I put out new content each week, and I can't wait to share more wedding tips, tricks, and advice with you all. Until next time, happy wedding planning.